Fowler. We're going to start by reading poems from Alfred Starr Hamilton, and I've been very surprised if any of you had heard of him. I've worked at the Poetry Library for 13 years and I'd never heard of him until Gareth came in and we had a conversation on the front desk of the library about this poet, which set me off reading this poet, and he's absolutely extraordinary. We're going to read some poems from him first, and then after the film Windows by Night we're going to read some poems by the heavyweight mid-American poet Frank O'Hara. But we're going to start with Alfred Starr Hamilton, and because he's such an obscurity, I'm going to read a couple of facts about his life before we read the poems. Alfred Starr Hamilton died in 2005 at the age of 91. He published 2 chapbooks and 1 full collection of poetry. Ron Silliman has written that Hamilton is the author of spare, wry, slightly surreal poems that have, so far as I can see, no real equivalent elsewhere in American English. Hamilton writes about the moon and the stars. He writes about writing. His work is distinctive for its flair with repetition and metaphor. Nearly all of his poems fit to one page. He did not give readings or promote his work, but he lived primarily as a poet, with poetry at the front end of his thoughts. He said, "Well, I am finally that kind of poet who cannot do anything but poetry. I like Keats." He lived a solitary, reclusive life. He once had a cat called Anonymous. He was born in Montclair, New Jersey in June 1914. He was mysteriously discharged from the army in World War II. He was arrested in 1961 for refusing to find shelter in an air raid drum. He wanted his gravestone to read AWOL. He suffered from acute mental problems. He often wrote to the Montclair Police Department. The longest job he held was filling gumball machines in local shops, which he did until he said he just couldn't look at them anymore. He spent the last few years of his life in a nursing home, where the nurses heard that he liked to write poems. They gave him notebooks and pencils, and he wrote poems. Jonathan Williams has said, "Dorothy's ruby slippers will get you across the deadly desert. So will these poems." Home or abroad?
Why didn't you say the stars were in her eyes?
Why didn't you say the cloud was over a sun?
Why didn't you say every cloud has a silver lining?
Why didn't you say the sun comes shining through?
Why didn't you say you were for peace?
Why didn't you stay home?
Why didn't you say there was thunder over the grass?
Why didn't you count the stumbling blocks over again?
Why didn't you say your elbow was on fire?
Why didn't you say you were for freedom?
Why didn't you say you were stupefied?
Why didn't you say you were dumbfounded?
Why weren't you confounded?
Why didn't you say the sun was for the looking glass?
Why didn't you say a cloud just now has passed over the looking glass? Slow parlour. Are you afraid of time? Are you afraid of the clock that unwinds itself in the slow parlour? Do you know of a drop of rain that falls on the spindle? Are you a friend of a box of dark June roses? Do you know of the pendulum that swings to the June chimes?
April lights, but nevertheless there are some other kinds of blue skies, some other way of counting the summer clouds that stayed. There is the red moon by October, some other kind of February lights, some other kind of January darkness that is deeper, a bronze rake, a winding road to where we are this evening.
Sunsets. Are you a golden blonde? Are you a silver blonde? Who believes in the man who tends to the sunsets? Do you believe in a train of daily thunder? Do you believe in a stoker that stokes the daily fires that is diving downwards? Are you a golden blonde? Are you a silver blonde? Do you believe in the man who built the moon, who constructed thunder out of a blade of grass?
A carrot. I wanted to find a little yellow candlelight in the garden.
Xerxes. It was also Xerxes the other night. The path they travelled was so slender, the bridge they were crossing was being torn asunder by the storm, and I, in my bonnet, was sound asleep. And the bullywhip of the winds and the storm lashed the troops of Xerxes, and Xerxes in his rage ordered the river itself to be lashed back, and the river responded, and the storm abated, and all was as calm as ever, and the engineers returned to their work.
Bon vive, 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 don't live forever, vive. Good livers don't live forever, vive. Stars don't, we don't. Live forever, sharpen ourselves for a magnificent eternal occasion. And of an occasion I saw one star fading. It bid itself vive, candled itself, handled itself, for must it stay lit forever on the eternally magnificent bitter black nights.
Vinegar Bend. Why didn't you say vinegar if they wanted vinegar for the flag that waved slovenly at Vinegar Bend, and lilted the tilted flagpole and scoured the pastor's gospel of rage and scrubbed the flagstone good and properly and worked their hands in the grime and oil and sent the flag to the cleaners and anything of the nature of vinegar for the flag that fluttered at Vinegar Bend?
Words ends. If a man walketh within a city, is he shaped of that city around the waistline of the river's end? If a man talketh within a city, shaped as words of that city around the tongue line of the river's bend? For if a man thinketh within a city, draped his thoughts of that city around, there is soot and smoke above the river's bend. Of his thoughts, of the down of a thistle, and leaves his talk tongued around the main line between the city's end. For if a man screameth within a city, sire shaped of the city, around the noon whistles at the head of the bend, his dreams are of time and a whistle. His talk is smoky fast, shaped around the tongue line of the hired city's bend, and he is the talk of the city, and he is the shape of that city. And what are his words of that city, around and around the great city's bends?
At the zoo. On the back of an invoice, I wrote my name in large capitalist June blue letters. And because money was involved, and so was my name ever in jeopardy, on the back of the same invoice, I rewrote my name in large capitalist June blue letters. And in leopardy and in jeopardy, I resolved, dissolved upon a radical eradicator, inking in, dissolving upon, jeopardizing my own name in large capitalist June blue letters.
Settling, I am spent upon the rocks, settling, my days are spent upon the coastline, upon the rocky shoulder of Maine. I am lashed inwards by salt and wind and spray. Seagulls fly to seagulls in mid-air. I am entranced, I am enchanted alone. The sea is spent upon the coastline. The war of the sea rises and falls among the rocky shoulders. I'll wander further, settling. I'll stand to greet the seagulls that cry in the mist, wander in, and amongst the boulders that have broken the strife pin, I'll find a bloody answer settling somewhere upon the rocky shoulder of Maine.
Wonderland. Nevertheless, Alice, Plymouth Rock was never going to be of glass and sand and sea. Moreover, those had been English glass stepping stones up onto the House of Lords through the looking glass, that had been a land of glass and sand and steeples. They'd left England, they'd left a glass wonderland.
That wrote on the back of the box of the phantasmagoria of a sedge match, that wrote on the back of the box, quickly, that said, I love you, hello.
Judith and her maidservant.
For they walked for miles.
For they walked for days.
For they walked for months.
For they walked for bloody ages in the wilderness.
For they stumbled upon castles.
For they stumbled upon larger jewels.
For they stumbled upon rubies.
For they stumbled upon the largest rube of all.
For they stumbled upon the excruciating rube of time.
This was theirs for the asking, though they refused.
For they stumbled upon folds of rhinoceri who knew no better than ants.
For they stumbled upon bearded giants.
For they stumbled upon bloodshot eyes.
For they stumbled upon peoples who had not lost their countenance.
For they stumbled upon peoples who had lost their taste and savour.
For they stumbled upon family aptitude for spiders an inch longer.
For they stumbled upon children who were boys or girls or either.
For they carried the gore's head a step farther at a time.
For they were on their way past these heaps of humid affluence.
Still they followed the thin trickle of a stream for some or a few violets.
For they were on their way toward the civilised forests. Alfred Starr Hamilton, thank you.
Cheers.